Marcus Williams stood perfectly still outside Buckingham Palace, his red uniform crisp and his black bearskin hat towering above his head. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as hundreds of tourists gathered behind the metal barriers, cameras clicking constantly. At 24 years old, Marcus had been serving as one of the Queen's Guard for 3 years, and he knew the routine by heart. The tourists always tried the same things. They would make funny faces, tell jokes, wave frantically, and sometimes even try to touch him. Marcus had learned to block it all out, standing motionless like a statue for hours at a time. His training had prepared him well for this duty, teaching him to remain completely still no matter what happened around him. On this particular Tuesday morning in June, the crowd seemed larger than usual. A group of American teenagers had positioned themselves directly in front of Marcus, taking selfies and giggling as they tried different poses. Behind them, an elderly Japanese couple waited patiently for their turn to take photos. French families chatted excitedly while pointing at the impressive guards, and Italian tourists argued about the best angle for their shots. Marcus could hear everything, but he gave no sign that he was listening. His eyes remained fixed straight. Ahead, his expression completely neutral. This was his job, and he took pride in doing it perfectly. The other guards respected him for his discipline and ability to stay focused, even when tourists became particularly annoying. What none of these visitors knew was that Marcus had a secret. Before joining the military, he had dreamed of becoming a professional singer. His voice had always been special, something his family and friends noticed from a young age. In school, he had been the star of every musical production. His teachers encouraged him to pursue music, and he had even auditioned for several talent shows. However, life had taken a different path. His family needed financial support, and the military offered steady income and benefits. Marcus put his musical dreams aside and focused on serving his country. He told himself that maybe someday he would return to singing, but for now, duty came first. The irony was not lost on him that he spent his days surrounded by people from all over the world, yet he could not speak to any of them. He often wondered what they thought about as they stared at him. Did they see him as a person, or just as part of the tourist attraction? Sometimes he wanted to break character and have a conversation, to learn about their travels and share stories about London. As the morning progressed, Marcus noticed a group of university students from America approaching. They looked different from the typical tourists. Instead of just taking photos, they seemed to be planning something. He could hear them whispering and saw them pointing in his direction. His training had taught him to be alert for potential security threats, but these students did not seem dangerous. They appeared to be up to some kind of harmless prank. The leader of the group, a young woman with curly hair and a bright smile, stepped forward. She looked directly at Marcus and began speaking in a loud, clear voice. "Excuse me, sir," she said. "We are music students from New York, and we have heard that the guards here have amazing voices. We were wondering if you might honor us with a song?" The other tourists nearby began to pay attention. Some laughed, thinking it was silly to ask a guard to sing. Others seemed curious about what would happen. Marcus remained perfectly still, showing no reaction to the request. This was exactly the kind of situation his training had prepared him for. Tourists often tried to get guards to break character, and the proper response was to ignore them completely. But the student was not giving up easily. "We know you are not supposed to move or speak," she continued, "but we promise we are not trying to cause trouble. We just love music and would be so honored to hear a British guard sing. It would make our entire trip to London unforgettable." Her friends joined in, encouraging Marcus to sing something, anything. "Please," called out one young man. "Just one song. We promise to be respectful." The crowd of tourists began to grow as word spread that something interesting might be happening. People stopped their own sightseeing to see if the guard would actually respond. Marcus felt his heart beginning to race. The students seemed genuine in their request, and he could hear the excitement building in the crowd. Part of him wanted to ignore them and continue with his duty, but another part of him was tempted. It had been so long since he had sung for an audience. The opportunity to share his gift with people from around the world was incredibly appealing. He thought about his commanding officers, and the strict rules about maintaining composure while on duty. Breaking character could result in serious consequences, including disciplinary action or even dismissal from the guard. But he also thought about his love of music and how much joy it had brought him throughout his life. The crowd continued to grow, with tourists calling out encouragement and taking videos with their phones. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes watching him, waiting to see what he would do. The American students looked hopeful, their faces filled with anticipation. Even the other tourists seemed to be holding their breath, wondering if they were about to witness something special. Marcus took a deep breath, still maintaining his rigid posture. The moment felt suspended in time, with the entire courtyard focused on him. He thought about his dreams of performing, about the music teachers who had believed in him, and about the gift he had kept hidden for so long. The sun continued to shine down on the palace grounds as Marcus made a decision that would change everything. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat as he wrestled with the decision. The American student with curly hair had not given up and was still looking at him hopefully. More tourists had gathered, creating a semicircle around his post. Some were holding up their phones ready to record whatever happened next. Finally, Marcus made his choice. Without moving his body or changing his facial expression, he opened his mouth and began to sing. The first notes of Amazing Grace flowed out in a rich, powerful baritone voice that seemed to come from deep within his chest. The sound was so unexpected and beautiful that several tourists gasped in surprise. His voice filled the courtyard with a warmth and depth that no one had anticipated. The melody carried across the palace grounds, reaching tourists who were hundreds of feet away. People stopped walking and turned toward the sound, drawn by the incredible quality of his singing. Marcus sang with perfect pitch and control, his military training helping him maintain proper breathing even while standing at attention. The American students stood frozen, their mouths open in amazement. They had hoped he might sing, but none of them had expected anything like this. The curly-haired student who had made the request felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to the beautiful performance. This was far beyond anything they could have imagined. The Japanese couple who had been waiting to take photos lowered their camera and simply listened. The husband reached for his wife's hand as they both became caught up in the emotion of the moment. Other tourists began to gather closer, but they did so quietly, not wanting to disturb the impromptu performance. Marcus sang the entire first verse without moving a single muscle in his body. His voice never wavered, and his pitch remained perfect throughout. When he reached the final note, he held it for several seconds, letting it echo off the palace walls before allowing it to fade into silence. The courtyard remained quiet for a moment after he finished. Then, as if everyone had been holding their breath, the crowd erupted in applause. Tourists cheered and whistled, and many were wiping away tears. The American students jumped up and down with excitement, hardly able to believe what they had just witnessed. "That was incredible," shouted the curly-haired student. "You have the most beautiful voice I have ever heard." Her friends nodded in agreement, all of them talking at once about how amazing the performance had been. Other tourists began approaching, wanting to express their appreciation for the unexpected gift they had received. But Marcus had already returned to his silent, motionless stance. His face showed no expression, and his eyes remained fixed straight ahead. To anyone who had not witnessed the singing, he would appear to be just another guard doing his duty. However, everyone who had heard him sing now looked at him with new respect and wonder. Word of what had happened began to spread quickly through the crowd of tourists. People who had missed the performance were disappointed, but those who had heard it described it as magical and unforgettable. Several visitors asked if he might sing again, but Marcus gave no indication that he had heard them. The other guards on duty had also heard Marcus sing, though they were too far away to see what had prompted it. They knew about his musical background, because he had mentioned it during their breaks, but none of them had ever heard him perform. They were impressed by what they had heard, but also concerned about how their superiors might react if they found out. Sergeant Davies, who was responsible for supervising the guards that day, had been inside the palace when Marcus sang. He emerged just as the crowd was finishing their applause, wondering what all the excitement was about. Several tourists approached him, eager to tell him about the guard who had just given them the most beautiful performance they had ever heard. First, Davies was skeptical. The guards were strictly trained never to break character, and it seemed unlikely that any of them would risk their careers by singing for tourists. However, as more people approached him with the same story, he began to take it seriously. Some of the tourists had recorded videos on their phones, and they showed him proof of what had happened. Davies watched the videos with growing amazement. The quality of Marcus's voice was extraordinary, and the fact that he had maintained perfect military posture while singing was remarkable. However, he was also concerned about the breach of protocol. Guards were not supposed to interact with tourists in any way, and singing definitely counted as interaction. He decided he needed to speak with Marcus immediately. As he approached the young guard's position, he could see that tourists were still gathering around, hoping for another performance. Some were calling out song requests, while others were simply staring at Marcus with admiration and curiosity. "Williams," Davies said quietly, using Marcus's last name as was military custom. "I need to speak with you immediately. Johnson will take your post." Marcus followed Davies to a private area inside the palace, his heart pounding with anxiety. He knew he was in trouble for breaking protocol, but he could not bring himself to regret what he had done. The joy on the tourists' faces and the feeling of sharing his gift had been worth it, even if it cost him his position. "I have been told that you sang for the tourists," Davies said, his expression serious. "Multiple witnesses have confirmed this, and I have seen video evidence. You know this is a serious breach of our regulations." Marcus nodded, still standing at attention. "Yes, sir. I understand the gravity of my actions." Davies studied the young man's face, looking for signs of defiance or regret. Instead, he saw someone who had made a difficult choice and was prepared to accept the consequences. "Why did you do it, Williams? You know this could end your career with the guard." For the first time since the incident, Marcus allowed his emotions to show. "The students seemed so genuine in their request, sir. I have not sung for an audience in years, and I felt compelled to share something beautiful with people who had traveled so far to visit our country. I know I violated protocol, but I do not regret bringing joy to those people." Sergeant Davies listened carefully to Marcus's explanation, his expression remaining stern but thoughtful. The young guard's honesty impressed him, even though the situation was serious. Davies had been supervising the Queen's Guard for over 15 years, and he had never encountered anything quite like this before. "Williams, you put me in a very difficult position," Davies said after a moment. "What you did was completely against regulations, but I have to admit that the tourists seem to have been deeply moved by your performance. I have never seen visitors react so positively to anything involving the guard." Marcus remained at attention, waiting to hear his fate. He had expected immediate disciplinary action, possibly even dismissal from his position. Instead, Davies seemed to be considering multiple factors before making his decision. "I need to report this incident to Colonel Harrison," Davies continued. "He will ultimately decide what happens next. Until then, you are suspended from guard duty pending investigation. Return to barracks and wait for further instructions." As Marcus walked back to his quarters, he felt a mixture of anxiety and relief. His secret was out, and there would be consequences, but he had finally been able to sing again. The memory of the tourists' faces and their enthusiastic applause made him smile despite his uncertain future. Meanwhile, outside the palace, something unexpected was happening. The tourists who had witnessed Marcus's performance were not simply moving on with their sightseeing. Instead, many of them were sharing their experience on social media, posting the videos they had recorded and describing the incredible voice they had heard from the palace guard. Sarah Chen, the American student with curly hair who had originally asked Marcus to sing, posted a video on Instagram with the caption, "You will not believe what just happened at Buckingham Palace. This guard has the voice of an angel." Within hours, her post had hundreds of likes and comments from people amazed by what they were seeing and hearing. The video began spreading rapidly across different platforms. Twitter users shared it with comments like, "This palace guard can sing," and "Most beautiful performance I have ever heard." Facebook groups dedicated to travel and music picked up the story. with members sharing their own reactions and tagging friends to watch. By evening, local news stations in London had caught wind of the story. Entertainment reporters began reaching out to the palace for comment, while music blogs analyzed Marcus's vocal technique and compared him to professional singers. The consensus was universal. This unknown palace guard had extraordinary talent. Colonel Harrison received Sergeant Davies's report just as the media attention was beginning to build. As the commanding officer responsible for the Queen's Guard, Harrison took protocol violations very seriously. However, he was also aware that this situation was generating unprecedented positive publicity for the Guard and the palace. Harrison decided to investigate the matter personally before making any decisions. He reviewed the videos that tourists had posted online, and like everyone else who heard Marcus sing, he was stunned by the quality of the performance. The young guard's voice was not just good, it was exceptional by any standard. The next morning, Harrison called Marcus into his office. The colonel was a stern man with 30 years of military experience, and his reputation for discipline was well known throughout the regiment. Marcus entered the office expecting the worst possible outcome. "Williams," Harrison began, "I have reviewed the incident from yesterday, and I have seen the public response to your performance. What you did was a clear violation of our protocols, and under normal circumstances you would face immediate dismissal." Marcus's heart sank, but he maintained his composure. He had known the risks when he decided to sing, and he was prepared to face whatever punishment was deemed appropriate. "However," Harrison continued, "these are not normal circumstances. Your performance has generated more positive attention for the Queen's Guard than we have received in decades. People around the world are talking about the talented young man who serves with honor while possessing extraordinary musical gifts." The colonel stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the palace grounds where tourists continued to gather in record numbers. Many of them were asking guards about the singing incident, hoping to witness another performance. "I have been contacted by representatives from several record labels," Harrison said, turning back to Marcus. "They are interested in meeting with you. I have also received calls from television producers and concert promoters. It seems your moment of protocol violation has opened doors you never expected." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. Instead of ending his career, his decision to sing had apparently created new opportunities he had never imagined possible. "Sir, I am grateful for this information, but I want you to know that I am committed to my service with the Guard. I do not want my musical interests to interfere with my duties," Marcus said, meaning every word. Harrison smiled for the first time since Marcus had entered the office. "That level of commitment is exactly why I am willing to work with you on this situation. I have a proposal that might benefit everyone involved." The colonel explained his idea. Rather than punishing Marcus, the Guard would embrace his talent. As a positive representation of their organization, Marcus would be allowed to maintain his position while also exploring musical opportunities, provided he followed specific guidelines and protocols. "We could arrange special performances during certain ceremonial events," Harrison suggested. "This would give tourists planned opportunities to hear you sing, while maintaining the dignity and traditions of the Guard. You would still serve as a regular guard, but you would also become our official musical ambassador." Marcus was overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. Just 24 hours earlier, he had been an anonymous palace guard whose musical dreams seemed buried forever. Now he was being offered the chance to combine his military service with his passion for music. "There is one condition," Harrison added seriously. "Any future performances must be pre-approved and properly scheduled. No more spontaneous singing during regular guard duty. We cannot have every tourist expecting every guard to entertain them." Marcus nodded eagerly. "I understand completely, sir. I am honored by this opportunity and will follow any guidelines you establish." As Marcus left the colonel's office, he felt like he was walking in a dream. His phone had been buzzing constantly with messages from friends and family who had seen the videos online. The story was continuing to spread, and people from around the world were expressing their amazement at his talent. Within days of Colonel Harrison's decision, Marcus found himself at the center of a media storm unlike anything he could have imagined. The video of his performance had gone viral, with millions of views across various social media platforms. News outlets from around the world were requesting interviews, and music industry professionals were calling the palace trying to reach him. Marcus's family back in Manchester could hardly believe what was happening. His mother, Janet Williams, had always known her son had a special gift, but she never expected it to bring him international attention. She proudly shared the videos with everyone in their neighborhood, and local newspapers began running stories about the hometown hero who became famous at Buckingham Palace. The palace communications team worked quickly to manage the sudden interest in Marcus. They arranged a carefully controlled media appearance where he could speak about his experience while maintaining the dignity expected of someone representing the Queen's Guard. Marcus was nervous but excited about the opportunity to share his story with the world. During his first television interview, Marcus sat in his dress uniform, speaking thoughtfully about his journey from aspiring musician to palace guard to overnight sensation. The interviewer was impressed by his humility and genuine surprise at all the attention he was receiving. "I never expected anything like this when I decided to sing that day," Marcus explained. "I was simply moved by the genuine request from those American students, and I wanted to share something beautiful with people who had traveled so far to visit our country." When asked about his musical background, Marcus spoke fondly of his childhood dreams and the difficult decision to choose military service over pursuing music professionally. "My family needed stability, and the military offered that," he said. "I thought I was giving up music forever, but now it seems like everything has come full circle in the most unexpected way." The interview generated even more positive attention, with viewers praising Marcus for his character and dedication to service. Social media was filled with supportive comments from people around the world who were inspired by his story. Many musicians and singers reached out to express their admiration for his talent and his choice to prioritize duty over personal ambition. Colonel Harrison had been monitoring the media coverage carefully, and he was pleased with how Marcus was representing the Guard. The young man's interviews showed maturity and respect for his position, while also highlighting the human side of the soldiers who served the crown. Based on the positive response, Harrison approved the first official musical performance by Marcus. It would take place during the weekly Changing of the Guard ceremony, giving tourists a scheduled opportunity to hear him sing while maintaining the formal structure of the event. The announcement of Marcus's official performance created excitement among tourists and Londoners alike. People began planning trips to the palace specifically to hear the singing guard, and hotels near Buckingham Palace reported increased bookings from visitors who wanted to witness the unique performance. On the morning of the scheduled performance, crowds began gathering hours before the ceremony was set to begin. The normal tourist attendance for the Changing of the Guard had tripled, with people traveling from across Europe and beyond to hear Marcus sing. Street vendors sold flowers and programs, while television crews set up equipment to broadcast the event live. Marcus prepared for the performance with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This would be his first official singing appearance, and he wanted to honor both his musical gift and his military service. He had chosen to sing Jerusalem, a song that combined his love of music with his pride in serving Britain. When the time came for his performance during the ceremony, Marcus stepped forward from the formation of guards. The massive crowd fell, silent, with thousands of people holding their breath in anticipation. Cameras focused on him as he prepared to sing for what would be his largest audience ever. His voice rang out clear and strong across the palace grounds, carrying the melody of Jerusalem with power and emotion that moved everyone present. The song seemed perfect for the moment, combining patriotism with beauty in a way that honored both the ceremony and the unique circumstances that had brought everyone together. As Marcus sang, many people in the crowd were visibly moved to tears. The American students who had originally requested that he sing were in the front row, crying with joy as they witnessed the incredible journey their simple request had started. Tourists from dozens of countries stood together, united by the beauty of the music and the inspiring story behind it. When the performance ended, the applause was thunderous and lasted for several minutes. People cheered and whistled, while others simply stood in respectful silence, still processing what they had experienced. Marcus returned to formation with his fellow guards, but the moment would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. The video of the official performance spread even more rapidly than his original spontaneous song had. Within hours, it was being shared by major news outlets and celebrity social media accounts around the world. Music critics praised Marcus's vocal technique and emotional delivery, while military commentators discussed the unprecedented nature of combining musical performance with ceremonial duty. Record label executives who had been following Marcus's story intensified their efforts to meet with him. Offers began arriving for recording contracts, concert tours, and television appearances. The magnitude of the opportunities was overwhelming, but Marcus remained focused on balancing any new ventures with his commitment to the Guard. Colonel Harrison was amazed by the continued positive response to Marcus's performances. Tourism to Buckingham Palace had increased significantly, with many visitors specifically mentioning their desire to see the singing Guard as their reason for traveling to London. The economic impact was substantial, and government officials were taking notice of the unexpected benefit Marcus had brought to British tourism. However, Harrison also recognized the challenges that came with Marcus's newfound fame. The young Guard needed protection from overzealous fans and media attention while continuing to perform his regular duties. Special security measures were put in place to ensure that Marcus could maintain some semblance of normal life despite his celebrity status. The other guards in Marcus's unit had mixed reactions to his fame. Some were genuinely happy for their colleague and proud to serve alongside someone who had brought such positive attention to their organization. Others worried that the focus on Marcus might overshadow their own dedicated service or create unrealistic expectations for all guards. Marcus was aware of these dynamics and worked hard to remain humble and supportive of his fellow guards. He made it clear in interviews that his musical ability was a personal gift that did not reflect on the talents or value of his colleagues. He consistently praised the other guards and emphasized that they were all equally committed to serving with honor. 6 months after that first spontaneous performance, Marcus's life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. The palace had established regular musical performances during special ceremonies, and each event drew crowds of thousands. Tourism. Officials estimated that Marcus's performances had brought millions of additional visitors to London, generating significant revenue for the local economy. The success had attracted attention from the highest levels of government and even members of the royal family. Marcus received word that he had been invited to perform at a private reception for visiting dignitaries, an honor that would have been unthinkable just months earlier for a young guard from Manchester. Despite all the opportunities that had emerged, Marcus had chosen to remain with the Queen's Guard while selectively accepting musical engagements. He had signed with a respected management company that specialized in classical and crossover artists, and they helped him navigate the complex world of professional music while respecting his military commitments. His first professional recording was a collection of traditional British songs and hymns, performed with the same powerful simplicity that had made him famous. The album was recorded at Abbey Road Studios, the legendary facility where the Beatles had created their masterpieces. Standing in that historic space, Marcus felt the weight of musical history and his own unexpected journey from anonymous guard to recording artist. The recording sessions revealed the depth of Marcus's talent to industry professionals who worked with established stars regularly. The sound engineers and producers were impressed not only by his vocal quality, but also by his professionalism and work ethic. Despite his sudden fame, Marcus approached every session with the discipline and attention to detail he had learned in military service. When the album was released, it debuted at #1 on the classical charts and reached the top 10 on the general music charts. Critics praised Marcus's rich, emotionally resonant voice and his authentic connection to the material. The success surprised even his management team, who had hoped for a respectable showing but never expected such widespread commercial appeal. Concert promoters immediately began requesting performance dates, but Marcus and his team were selective about accepting engagements. They chose venues and events that aligned with his image as both a dedicated serviceman and a serious musician. His first major concert was held at Royal Albert Hall, with proceeds supporting military charities that assisted veterans and their families. The Royal Albert Hall performance was a milestone moment in Marcus's career. As he stood on the same stage where legendary performers had captivated audiences for over a century, he thought about the journey that had brought him there. The audience included military personnel, government officials, music industry figures, and ordinary people who had been moved by his story. Marcus opened the concert with Amazing Grace, the same song that had started everything months earlier in the palace courtyard. As his voice filled the magnificent hall, many audience members were transported back to that first magical moment when a simple request from tourists had revealed hidden talent. The emotional connection between performer and audience was immediate and profound. Throughout the concert, Marcus shared stories about his experiences as a guard and the unexpected turn his life had taken. His natural charm and humility won over the audience completely, and by the end of the evening, he had established himself as more than just a novelty act. He was a legitimate performer with something meaningful to offer the music world. The success of the Royal Albert Hall concert led to invitations from venues across Europe and beyond. Marcus accepted a limited number of international performances, always ensuring they did not conflict with his military duties. His management worked closely with Colonel Harrison to create a schedule that honored both his service commitments and his growing musical career. During this period, Marcus also became involved in charitable work that combined his military background with his musical platform. He performed at fundraising events for organizations supporting wounded veterans, military families, and underprivileged children interested in music education. These appearances were particularly meaningful to him because they allowed him to use his unexpected fame for positive purposes. One of the most touching moments came when Marcus visited a military hospital to perform for injured soldiers. Many of the patients were young men and women his own age, who had been wounded in service to their country. As he sang for them, Marcus was reminded of the sacrifices made by military personnel and their families, and he felt grateful that his own service had taken a different path. The media attention around Marcus remained largely positive, but it also brought challenges. He struggled with the loss of privacy that came with fame, and he sometimes missed the simpler days when he could walk through London without being recognized. Photographers followed him during his off-duty hours, and fans would wait outside the palace hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous singing guard. To manage these pressures, Marcus worked with a public relations specialist who helped him maintain appropriate boundaries while staying connected with his supporters. He established social media accounts where he could share updates about his music and express gratitude to fans, but he was careful to maintain the dignity expected of someone representing the Queen's Guard. The other guards in his unit had gradually adjusted to having a celebrity among their ranks. Some initially felt awkward about the attention Marcus received, but over time they came to appreciate the positive light he had cast on their profession. Recruitment for the Queen's Guard increased significantly after Marcus's story became known, with young people inspired by the idea that military service could lead to unexpected opportunities. Colonel Harrison had become something of a celebrity, himself as the commanding officer, who had made the wise decision to support Marcus rather than punish him. Military leadership courses now included case studies about Harrison's handling of the situation, using it as an example of how to turn potential problems into positive outcomes. As Marcus reflected on the incredible year he had experienced, he remained amazed by how one moment of decision had changed everything. The American student who had asked him to sing had stayed in touch, and they had become friends. Sarah Chen often told people that her simple request had been the best question I ever asked, and she took pride in having played a small role in Marcus's journey. The success had not changed Marcus's fundamental character or values. He remained committed to his military service and grateful for the opportunities that had emerged from his unexpected moment of fame. He had learned to balance his duties as a guard with his growing career as a musician, always remembering that both roles were forms of service to others. 2 years after that life-changing moment at Buckingham Palace, Marcus Williams had become an international success while remaining true to his military service. His story had inspired countless people around the world, proving that extraordinary opportunities could emerge from the most ordinary moments when someone has the courage to share their gifts. Marcus had released 2 more albums, both achieving commercial and critical success. His music had evolved from simple traditional songs to more complex arrangements that showcased his growing confidence as a performer. He had worked with renowned orchestras and collaborated with established artists, but he never forgot the simple power of his unaccompanied voice that had first captivated those tourists. The palace had embraced Marcus's success completely, creating an official program called Cultural Guards that allowed other talented servicemen and women to share their abilities with the public. Several guards had revealed their own hidden talents in art, poetry, and music, inspired by Marcus's example. The program had become a model for other military units around the world, showing how organizations could support individual excellence while maintaining discipline and tradition. Marcus's performances at the palace had become legendary events that required advance booking months in preparation. Tourists planned entire vacations around the opportunity to hear him sing during ceremonial events. The economic impact on British tourism had been substantial, with government officials crediting Marcus's performances with attracting millions of additional visitors and generating hundreds of millions in revenue. The success had allowed Marcus to establish a foundation supporting music education for underprivileged children and assistance programs for military veterans. He regularly performed at fundraising events and donated a portion of his concert earnings to these causes. The foundation had provided instruments and lessons to thousands of young people, and several scholarship recipients were now pursuing professional musical careers themselves. Marcus had also written an autobiography titled The Singing Guard, which became a bestseller and was translated into multiple languages. The book detailed his journey from childhood musical dreams through military service to unexpected fame, emphasizing themes of duty, perseverance, and the importance of following one's calling. Readers around the world connected with his message that success could come in the most unexpected ways, to those who remained true to their values. The American students who had originally asked Marcus to sing had all graduated from university, but they remained connected to his story. Sarah Chen had become a music teacher, inspired by Marcus's example to help others discover and develop their talents. She often told her students about the importance of asking for what they wanted and being open to unexpected possibilities. The video of Marcus's first performance continued to be shared regularly on social media, introducing new generations to his story. Music teachers used it as an example of natural talent and authentic performance, while leadership instructors discussed the courage required to break protocol when doing so could serve a greater good. Marcus had received numerous awards and honors, including recognition from music industry organizations and military commendations for his positive representation of the armed forces. However, he remained most proud of the messages he received from ordinary people who told him that his story had inspired them to pursue their own dreams or overcome challenges in their lives. The relationship between Marcus and his fellow guards had evolved into mutual respect and pride. They understood that his success reflected well on all of them, and many had become close friends who supported each other through the unique challenges of serving in such a public role. The camaraderie within the unit was stronger than ever, built on shared commitment to excellence and service. Colonel Harrison had been promoted partly due to his skillful handling of Marcus's situation and the positive publicity it had generated for the military. He continued to serve as a mentor to Marcus, helping him navigate decisions about balancing his musical career with his service obligations. Their relationship had become a case study in enlightened leadership that supported individual growth while maintaining organizational standards. As Marcus stood outside Buckingham Palace on a sunny morning exactly 2 years after his first performance, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. He was wearing the same red uniform and bearskin hat, standing in the same position where everything had begun. Tourists continued to gather, many hoping to witness another magical moment. A new group of American students approached, led by a young man with an eager expression who reminded Marcus of Sarah Chen from that first day. The student looked directly at Marcus and spoke clearly. "Excuse me, sir, we have heard about the famous singing guard. Would you honor us with a performance? Marcus smiled internally, remembering how nervous he had been when faced with a similar request 2 years earlier. Now, he knew exactly what to do. He had a scheduled performance later that afternoon during the ceremonial changing of the guard, and he gently directed the students to return for that official event. The tourists were disappointed but understanding, and Marcus felt proud that the palace had found a way to honor both tradition and the public's desire to experience something special. The structured approach had allowed him to continue serving as a guard while also sharing his musical gifts in an appropriate setting. As the students walked away, chatting excitedly about returning for the afternoon performance, Marcus thought about all the people whose lives had been touched by his story. He had received letters from aspiring musicians who had been encouraged to pursue their dreams, from military personnel who felt proud of their service, and from ordinary individuals who had been inspired to take chances and share their own hidden talents. The most meaningful letter had come from a young soldier stationed overseas who had written, "Your story reminded me that serving our country doesn't mean giving up who we are. It means finding ways to serve that honor both our duty and our gifts. Thank you for showing us that we can be fully ourselves while wearing the uniform." Marcus had framed that letter and kept it in his quarters as a reminder of why his journey mattered beyond personal success. He had learned that his voice was not just about beautiful music, but about inspiring others to believe in possibilities they might never have considered. The afternoon performance drew the usual crowd of thousands, including the American students, who had approached him earlier. As Marcus stepped forward to sing, he felt the same sense of privilege and responsibility he had experienced during that first spontaneous moment. His voice rang out across the palace grounds, carrying with it all the hope, dreams, and unexpected possibilities that life could offer to those brave enough to share their gifts with the world. When the performance ended and the tourists began to disperse, many of them carried with them more than just memories of beautiful music. They carried the inspiring story of a young man who had chosen duty over dreams, only to discover that sometimes the universe has plans that are bigger and more beautiful than anything we could imagine for ourselves. Marcus returned to his formation, with his fellow guards ready to continue serving with honor, while knowing that his journey was far from over. There would be more music to make, more people to inspire, and more opportunities to show the world that extraordinary things could happen when ordinary people had the courage to answer, when life called them to something greater. The palace courtyard gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of Marcus's performance lingered in the air like the echo of a perfect note. Somewhere in the crowd, perhaps another tourist was gathering the courage to make an unusual request, not knowing that they might be about to witness the beginning of another magical story. And Marcus Williams, the singing guard of Buckingham Palace, stood ready to continue proving that the most beautiful music comes not just from perfect voices, but from hearts brave enough to share their gifts with a world that desperately needs to believe in the possibility of dreams coming true in the most unexpected ways.